Hello everyone, and good to see you all here at Smart Commerce 2020. Today I'm going to talk to you about the CX iceberg, which is customer experience iceberg. I'm going to share you the basic idea and the concept of how we ramped up the digital development at SD1. And also we are going to take a look at the underlying architecture there. So, as you may know, I come from a company called Lamia, which is a full offering software development company. We also have cloud data and design services, so-called full offering. And we teamed up in this case with SD1, which is a Nordic, very well-known energy company. They have also their extensive retail network and a number of refineries in the Nordics where they produce their biofuels and also traditional fuels. So the basic setup already was very interesting. The challenges that we came up with in this digital transformation were maybe something that you have also confronted in your daily work when you're planning some digital strategies. Basically, you have this very typical setup nowadays that you have high requirements and standards for users for digital UX. And always there's the evil burden of the legacy ID in the background, which then comes into that you have very low cost efficiency, which means that high input you're pouring up a lot of money to your development, and then you are getting just low output, which means that efficiency falls down the bigger the setup becomes. Also, the technological environment is usually very scattered. There are a number of technologies that you need to use in nowadays very challenging environment. So how to combine all of these into one unified iceberg. So the idea of this concept is that actually the visible part, I mean the user interface, the visuals that your customers are seeing, that is actually the minor share of the whole big picture and how you ramp up your customer experience. So to ensure a delightful user experience, a lot of work is really needed behind the service. So let's go through and let's see what has this iceberg eaten itself. So first we have the boring stuff on the very bottom. We have the legacy systems, the enterprise service buses, and so on, like ERP, CRMS, WMS, so on. So these are, of course, the basic building blocks of the enterprise architecture. You will need these to ramp up your digital development, but this is not where you should be pouring your development budget. However, there's one very important point in these systems. It's the master data. If your master data is not in good shape and very well structured, you need to fix that first. Otherwise, everything else that you're building on top of that will become a lot of harder. Anyway, it will be hard to scale the development efficiently if you're investing in this system nowadays. Big systems, big cost. Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff, being microservices and APIs. So the point here is that you should be offloading the functionalities from the legacy system to these layers, microservices and APIs. Of course, you will need these legacy systems on the very bottom of the layers, but you need to be using them via APIs and doing the heavy lifting on this microservice layer. There is so much technical jargon that I could share with you and talk about this 1 hour, but we can go into the details later at Lamia booth. So then going up to the front-end layer. It can be basically anything. When I'm talking about front-end, it can be your self-service POS system in your store. It could be native application. It could be web application. Just anything. However, if you need to remember one point from this slide, it will be use component libraries. If you don't know what is a component library, please Google it after the presentation. However, use those, and then you're going to get a consistent user experience in a multi-channel way. So in essence, it means that if you have this red add to cart button in your digital channels, it really should behave and look exactly the same in all of the channels. And you don't want to be calling that red button multiple times. So that is when the component library comes into play. Moving on. The last one, UI and design at the very top of the iceberg. This is, of course, the visible part that users usually see. But as I said, there are multiple layers beneath. However, the main point here is that you should be using a design system. Same thing as I said with the component libraries. If you don't know what's a design system, please Google it afterwards, because that's going to be a big win for your design part. And combine that with the component library that I mentioned. So, because I'm always delivering, I'm delivering also you the fifth point, which is people and organization. There is no bolded bullet point, as you can see, because all of these are super important. And as you may know, this is maybe one of the most complex areas in IT to success. But if you get this right, then everything else becomes a lot easier, I promise. For example, at SD1, the key for success there was to ramp up the business IT dialogue. We created forums and routines where business and IT people meet and talk about the ideas and about the roadmaps in the future. Because usually the setup is such that the IT is doing their own tech stuff, and then on the other hand, business is planning their roadmaps. But when you put those two together, okay, it's harder than it sounds, but that's where the success comes from. So now when you're familiar with the iceberg layers, let's take a look at the principles. 1. UX is built on top of multiple layers. 2. Do not unify systems, unify technologies. 3. Focus on the iceberg, not to the legacy systems. And 4. The implementation size, scale, and timeline can vary. So let's take a look. As I said, principle 1 is that the user experience is built on top of multiple layers. What this means is that in order to get the full UX right, all the layers beneath that are most often invisible for the end customer, they really must cooperate and behave and function well. Okay? It's not very trivial task to accomplish that, and there will be some time needed to fix the stack and develop the stack. But when it's completed, it will be very effective and efficient way of doing the digital development. Your target would be here fast launch time of new services and flexibility of the layers and the components. 2. Do not unify systems, unify technologies. Okay, you can hear me always telling you about modularization and separation of different layers and components and so on. But you don't need to be coding and developing all of that with different technologies. You don't need 10 different technologies to code 10 different microservices. You should be doing this unification on all layers of your iceberg. So, for example, pick one microservice framework, and all the development teams can collaborate to that framework, solving the common problems, and that way you can accumulate your stack of digital goods in the long run. Also, you can do this unifying technologies on front-end level by using the component libraries that I mentioned. And also the same principle applies to the design layer, because you can use the design system that is then accumulating your design digital goods on that layer. Point 3 is that you should be focusing on this iceberg, not legacy systems. Of course, as I said, if you have problems with master data, fix those first. But on the other hand, developing big systems like ERP is usually cost-intensive, innovation lacking, but you still need to have them to have basic operations. They are still good supporting building blocks for digital competencies, but actually the rapid development and prototyping, it happens totally elsewhere. This new type of digital stack is actually your way out of the slow pace of monolithic system development. I would say that you should be releasing twice per week, not twice per year. And point 4 is that the implementation size, scale, and timeline can totally vary between different companies. The case is that, of course, not all the companies need the same type of digital setup. They don't need to have the same size of teams and competencies. But on the other hand, I would say that these layers of the iceberg will be represented in some form or another in all of the companies. However, you should also be remembering that the efficiency versus team size, that is not linear, never. So the scaling of this type of development will be still hard to do. And one of the most important points here is also to remember that you don't want to be transforming your analog way of doing business directly to the digital channels. Because
Digital channels are totally different. You don't want to copy the same business logic that you are running in analog world to the digital channels. That's just not going to work. All right. So basically, I hope you got some ideas based on this concept. Come to visit our booth back there if you have any other questions and if you want to continue this discussion and about technologies or development or anything. But basically, at this point, I thank you. My name is Lauri Järvenpää, and hope to see you at the booth. Thank you.